Welcome to the Block Time podcast by Riot Platforms. This is a podcast where we do a deep dive into all things Bitcoin, Bitcoin mining, and of course, what Riot is up to. So today we've got two guests. This is the first time we've had two guests. And we've got here Matt Barr and Anthony Brown. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
So Matt Barr, what is your official title on paper?
I'm the minor maintenance manager at our Rockdale location.
Got it. And I think of you as like head of HR for the miners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure seems like it.
And Anthony, you are the VP of IT.
Yes, sir. That's myself.
So first question I want to ask is kind of about your journey overall in terms of education, career, up until, joining the company. So I'll start with you, Matt.
Yeah. So essentially, I've always been interested in computers. Before coming to the company, I actually lost my job due to COVID. Before that, I was working for Geek Squad with Best Buy. And when I lost my job due to COVID, I heard about Windstone, formerly now is Riot, obviously. I heard about it, and I decided to come and apply out there. And I started out as a basic data center technician.
I got a question for you on computers. What's the first processor you remember installing yourself or using?
So back then, I think I was installing an AMD Ryzen 3.
Yeah.
Probably about 6 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They were brand new back then when I was building my first gaming PC.
I think I was doing a Pentium 4.
Oh, well. We're going to show a gap in our ages. In a few seconds.
Yeah. What about you, Anthony?
So my journey into, I guess you could say, the foray of technology. My parents, I could say this, they fed me anything that I wanted to do that had to do with tech growing up. It's like toys. I would take them apart, put them back together, create other things, like take calculators, take the little solar piece out and apply it into my toys and try to charge batteries as a kid. And this was in the 80s. Like as far as my education's concerned, my parents also, they put me in a bunch of programs that pushed me forward towards technology. And this was in the days of the Apple IIGSs and whatnot, like back in the back days when we had monochrome machines and whatnot. So I was taught the program as a child. I messed around with Fortran, did a few things like that. My dad, he's a handyman, and he owns a handyman service. So he always had these little projects that he needed me to be helping him with as a child, hands-on projects. And I mean, this is things like working on AC units, very primitive like camera units and whatnot. So like I had my hands on tech and like radio systems and things like that from a young age. That led me to go into high school. I was in a few advanced whatever classes, not because I was the smartest guy, but because I understood things, and I had teachers that backed me up in those times to actually help me grow in those areas. When it came down to college was kind of a blur. If you guys know me personally, you guys know I have a lot of hobbies. And as a child, I was the same way. I went to school originally because I wanted to teach history and build furniture. And when I was in college, one of my teachers, she was having an issue with just a networking issue. Helped her out in the class. And she was like, you're really good at this. Maybe you should focus on networking and computers and things like this. And I remember at the time I told her, I was like, I don't know if there's a future in this. I really think the future for me is me being a history teacher. I think I could change the world teaching history. And this teacher said, nah, you're good at history, but I think you're better at computers. And I had a few other teachers tell me that. And I had a few other mentors tell me that. Because what I found myself doing is I found myself working, just doing jobs that involved me, like writing programs, helping with websites. And this is in the early 90s. And I just kind of fell into that gap. And then, again, my parents were there to help me up, back me up with this. Educators and mentors helped me up and back me up to keep me into this area. And it just was, I wouldn't say it's been the easiest journey to get here, but with the correct backing that I did have, it made it easy. Yeah. As far as my first processor that I installed into a computer myself was a Pentium 2 processor.
Before my time.
Way before your time.
Way before my time.
Way before your time. I was with my buddies in my neighborhood. We were big into upgrading our machines to play Doom.
Do you remember what clock speeds were like back then?
Oh, not off the top of my head. Like another thing about me back then is I didn't necessarily have the most money to do all these updates, but a lot of my buddies in the neighborhood did. So I would get a lot of their, their leftovers.
Yeah.
And I really got into not necessarily overclocking, but maintaining. Because my buddies were overclocking. I just couldn't afford to overclock, but I was there to catch their old parts.
Yeah.
Being resourceful, I mean, that's super valuable as well.
Absolutely. Use what you can use.
Yeah. And so as y'all progress kind of professionally, at some point you cross paths with Bitcoin. When was that first time for you, Anthony?
This is crazy. So there's this podcast called This Week in Tech by Leo Laporte. He was on the original G4 network, video gaming network. This is, again, before your time, Matt. We had this TV show called This Week in Tech, and on the TV show, on the podcast, what they did is they talked about technology, IT stuff. It truthfully was just a podcast about IT, and it was a network about IT. Well, he had a segment with another presenter called Steve Gibson. It's called This Week in Security, or Security Now. I'm sorry, Security Now. And he said, "Hey, if you guys want to just promote the podcast, there's this thing called Bitcoin. It's not necessarily worth anything yet. This is when it was fragments. This is like a few cents. He was like, if you guys want to donate to me on this is the way you could help out." And at the time, I was doing freelance IT work. I wasn't really making the most money, but his podcast was so influential in my life. I was like, well, all I got to do is turn my computer on and like mine. I didn't understand the concept of mining yet at the time. I was like, all I got to do is mine, and I could just give this guy money. And I was like, cool, I'll do that. That's completely, perfectly fine. And the craziest thing is I mentioned it to my boss at my old job at the time. And it's in the oil and gas industry. At the time, we had these platforms that just had infinity power. I said, hey, can I put my machine on one of these rigs and plug it in and have it mine for me? It's not really going to take much power, but it's throwaway power anyway. And he goes, sure. He said, in fact, if you could build a machine, if you can make enough money to buy back that machine, you could have it. And that's how it started for me. And this is in the very, very beginning. I mean, in the very beginning, I'm just throwing Bitcoin at whatever. I was buying shirts. Yeah. I was donating to because podcasts were kind of newish, and it was just like, it was internet money at the time. Like I love the concept. I love the idea of using compute to make something happen. And then it was what I was interested in. So I just kept on diving deeper. And then sure enough, I ended up here.
That's awesome. The platform is an offshore?
Yes.
Wow.
So I was allowed to do it on 2 offshore platforms and 2 onshore platforms. The onshore platforms are more of like a pop-up deal. Like you move into certain areas and pieces of land and they just make a rig in that area. They just have so much throwaway and waste power that just goes to nothing. And I was like, we could use this. Because before that, I was actually putting SETI on machines. I don't know if you guys remember that. Yeah. I might again be before your time. But I used to put SETI on these rigs. And I was like, it's like just like SETI. It's the same thing. It's just a little different. And they backed me up, and it worked out.
It's really sad we still haven't found any of the extraterrestrials.
I know.
Despite all the compute, Bitcoin has actually been less wasteful
yes.
than SETI has.
Absolutely.
All things considered.
There was a point in time in the mid-2000s where I could say most IT guys and gals, most IT people were putting SETI on every machine that they actually did work on. I don't know if you remember that time, if you guys were actually in the tech world at that time, but it was a thing. It was kind of similar to what this is.
It also had really cool visuals.
Yes.
When you ran it. So I ran it on my laptop, wasted my parents' electricity.
Yep.
But it was really cool. Yeah. Matt.
So I think the first time that I ever was exposed to Bitcoin is I was working for Best Buy and I was doing a house call, doing some repairs in their house. I think I was repairing their security cameras or something like that. And this guy that I was working with, he comes up to me, he's very distressed. And he is panicking because he's holding this box. And I now know that this was a wallet. And he says, I can't get into it. Oh. And it was one of those common things where, hey, you're on your last stride. He's like, can you get into this? And at that time, I was not as anywhere experienced as I am now. I think I was probably 20 years old, 20. And I was like, I don't know. And I'm like, what? Because he's sweating.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's Bitcoin. I have thousands and thousands of dollars on here. And he's asking this random Best Buy guy to help him get into it. So I sent him to a buddy of mine that actually had experience with getting that was his thing. He got into places. I kind of like, and so after that, I was really interested, and I started going home and doing my research. Started buying little small amounts here and there, stocking it up, similar to Anthony. This was probably 2018, so it wasn't just internet money. It had some value at that time, and eventually, I had a good investment of my own, and I was able to start making smart purchases. And then when I lost my job, I decided to make the plunge and move in here and actually start a career in it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that Bitcoin can be so secure you can lock yourself out of it. I think it's like one of the dangers.
I wish I could go back with everything that I know now to try to help this guy out, because I still to this day don't know if he ever got into his Wall Street.
Tragic.
It's a donation to everyone else who's not gotten it. It's deflationary. And so how did you come across Riot or Whinstone?
Actually, my father-in-law, he lived in the Rockdale area, and he had just gotten a job there, and he explained to me what it was. Even at that time, he didn't quite know what it was that they were doing out there. He's a much more construction and pumps kind of guy. And he explained it to me, and I was like, oh, wait, no, I've heard of this place. And I just put in an application, packed up all my stuff. I'm originally from Houston. Packed up all of my stuff. Me and my wife decided, hey, we're going to take this dive.
Wow, awesome. What about you, Anthony?
So I actually, at my old job, I worked as an inventor. I did a lot of work over there, and one of my coworkers at the time, he was like, "Man, you really should put some of your inventions online. People should see some of the work that you're doing." Because I was doing some work for work and outside of work, and I put one of my videos online. It was the first one that I put on, and one of the original Whinstone team saw it and passed it on to, I guess you could say, the upper team. Lyle, I believe. Yeah, you remember because he's been on this podcast.
Our audience is familiar with
Yeah,
Lyle.
you know Lyle. He saw it and he messaged me, and he was like, "Hey man, you want to come check out our site?" And I'm like, he's like, "It's a data center," and I was like, "Nah, I don't know about that, man." And it was crazy because the week before that, he had made a post about the job site, and he made a post about just COVID, and I had messaged him. I said, "Hey man, I'm 3D printing masks if you want some masks." And I've got hundreds of them because I was 3D printing them by the hundreds in my lab that I had. And that message sparked him to go ahead and look at the videos I had been posting for work. And they caught a glimpse of those videos, like, "We want you to come check out the site." And I mean, I put it off for a solid, like, maybe 2 months. I was like, "Nah, man, I don't know about that, dude. It's a data center." I was like, I'll go check it out as a friend at best. And I remember pulling up and I was like, what in the world? I was like, this site is amazing. And it was one of the most technologically advanced sites I'd seen to date in real life. Because you see data centers. I've been to hundreds of data centers in my time. You don't see data centers like that data center. You just don't. In pictures you see, but it's not really something that can be grasped unless you're actually there in real life. And when I got there, it was kind of like seeing one of the wonders of the world in technology terms. As a dork like myself, like, to me, it was a big deal. And it just blew my mind. And they sat me down and they said, "Hey, we like your video. We really think that you could provide some use to this company." And at the time, I mean, I was making tools in the oil field. I mean, yes, I'm a network professional. I've been doing this my entire career, but it's like I didn't think that I had the ability to actually help anything here. And then they brought me in. They brought me in as a team. I got to meet everyone. I got to meet people like Matt. I got to meet the site. And this was just like my first week just being just on the site itself. And they made me feel as if I could actually help. And they made me feel that I could actually use my talents and help towards the overall goal of the company. And once they made me feel that way, I left, right? Because I was only here for a week just to check out the site. I wasn't here to get a job or anything. I went back and I thought about the past, how much of my time that I put into Bitcoin in the past, and how much, I mean, I still had been dabbling back and forth, but it wasn't necessarily a focus of mine. And I remember the joy and energy and all the time I put into it, and how much I enjoyed just what it was as a concept and everything overall. And it made me stop. And I had to rethink everything. And then I had to go to my wife and say, "Hey, babe, there's this data center in the middle of the desert," to me at least, because I'm in Houston at the time, "and I want to give this a chance." And, Lyle, the team, they called me back and forth often, like every other day. Hey man, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? We really like your videos. Send us some more videos. So I'm sending videos and I'm getting positive reinforcement. I'm having people say, hey, you could be utilized here in these areas. And then I just made the jump. And just like Matt, but for me, it was a little different. This is crazy. In the very beginning, my first few months here, I was driving from Houston to Rockdale every morning and then driving back every night because I was living in Houston and I was still kind of, it's nervous. Like I'd been working in my industry before for 10 years and I was jumping out of that same industry into something completely different, a new horizon. But I just knew from what I had into it before, I knew what I saw. I knew the group of people that I got to meet, the energy that I got from those people, just the vibe, just overall. I knew I was making the right decision. So for me, it wasn't even a thing. It was like making that 3-hour drive every day in the morning and at night every day to go home and come in. It didn't even feel like anything. It was just like throwing some books, throwing a podcast, and I'm good.
Yeah.
So it was a big jump for me, but in all honesty, it was the most worthwhile jump I've ever made in my entire life, outside of marriage and things like that.
Right.
Career-wise.
Yeah. And how would you describe kind of how your role has evolved, how your responsibilities have evolved since joining the company? We can go with Matt. Yeah. Give you a break.
Oh man, it's been a massive change for me because like whenever I started at the very bottom. Like I was there, I was just cleaning the site, running cat cables, terminating RJ45s, and that was pretty much my entire job, And then I worked my way up to being a supervisor over the data center technicians, which they didn't really have much to do with repair at that time, but I knew that's where I wanted to go. And then lo and behold, I see the job posting of minor maintenance supervisor. I was like, this is what I want and everything. And then Anthony came along. Anthony was my first boss in that department, and he helped mentor me to keep on not only learning technical skills, because that was my weakest point at that time, but learning the corporate skills as well of supervisory and being good with people. And then I just kept building that from there to being the supervisor over minor maintenance. And now I'm the manager, and hopefully I'm going to have a heavy hand over Corsicana and all future sites as well.
Yeah, awesome.
Oh, so when I came in originally, it was more of a individual contributor position. I worked with Ashton. We did all of the things for the network, for the mines, just in general in the very, very beginning. Once the Riot acquisition came through, I was tasked with the ability of, hey, you're good at making things work, create a minor maintenance team. And I came across Matt, and Matt was, at the time, in my opinion, one of the hardest workers on the floor. Like he said, he didn't have technical skills. I believe he did. I just think that's him. I think that's him being modest. I felt he was very talented, and his work ethic was what really pulled that department together. And for about a year plus, I could say I worked in minor maintenance, and the idea of that was we needed to find better and newer ways to make the mines run better. We needed to be able to repair them. I thought of this more of like a pit crew for miners. Like you come in with the race car, we come and fix it, whatever it is. And I wanted the team itself to just be prepared for anything that went wrong when the miners were working at the time. After the minor maintenance team had been taken completely over by Matt, and we had full confidence in Matt's abilities, I was moved over to director of IT and then VP of IT. All that being said, that is my bread and butter. That's where all my basis is. My history is in IT. And so that's where they put me. And so currently I'm just working with the IT team. We're just doing day-to-day work, making sure everything in the infrastructure side is correct. We're now taking over the networks of the mines. We're working on that, and we're just making sure those things are all working out.
Awesome. In terms of minor maintenance, like what are some of the challenges that you encounter kind of in the real world of, hey, these machines, will have this go wrong or that go wrong?
Definitely the biggest challenge by far is going to be making sure your environment is up to scale with your mine. For example, little things that you may not perceive right away, because we didn't even perceive it right away, is humidity, dust, temperature of your mine. Because these miners, they can be very picky about when they want to run and what environment they want to run in. So it's not even always about the miner. It's about the building around it that can keep your optimization up to par.
Yeah. Right. And that's where, so this is, Matt was describing the air miners. the difference between that and the immersion miners, when we're talking about controlling, it's like the humidity and whatnot. The benefit of us using immersion is that we get to control the weather variable. With air miners, you have the uncontrollable idea of weather. It could be 1,000 degrees outside, it could be 100 degrees below zero the next day. With the idea of immersion is we control that aspect. The immersion miners, you have, they're in a liquid. That liquid shouldn't change in theory if everything else around it's, correct. So there's a bunch of different variables. Like you said, with air miners, you're going to have a lot more problems than you will have with immersion mining.
The problems change, right? Like there's definitely unique problems to immersion because you still have to maintenance those tanks. The PDUs are completely different style, as well as like firmware that goes on these machines. You need to have different settings on these, so different errors will pop up. But I can confidently say when it comes to maintenance, immersion is so much less than air. And it is, in my opinion, definitely the future where I want to go.
Absolutely. Completely agrees.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. We're doing that in Corsicana, like exclusively for this first phase. Yeah,
a lot less problems in Corsicana with that.
Yep,
it's a learning thing, right? Because I know that Lyle and the Winston team, they were building in Louisiana,
right,
and learning, and then taking those learnings to the site in Rockdale, and then learning in Rockdale, and then taking that to Corsicana.
Yeah, in Louisiana, the weather is horrid compared to here.
Yeah.
You want to talk about humidity? It's always humid in Louisiana. The situations that they had to run into over there were a lot different than this, but it definitely prepared them for what we're running throughout in the Rockdale site currently.
Yeah. And then I know that we put in recently a big order for micro-BT machines. Matt, you were instrumental in kind of testing these and really making sure that they were what we needed. What did you observe in the micro-BTs that made you confident that was a good direction to go in?
Man, those M56s and micro-BT miners, they're built like tanks. They run until you tell them not to run. And that's what I love about them. Their borders are so much wider in terms of temperature and what they can withstand. Their efficiency is top notch. And their error codes, the great thing about micro-BT is they give you all of the error codes and what to do when you see them. We had to previously learn that for ourselves or pay for the classes to go and learn that. Micro-BT said, hey, you invested in us. Here is everything you will need. And that has been instrumental in our entire testing process. I believe we've seen maybe 2 or 3 errors pop up in our entire testing, and they were quick fixes.
That's awesome. Very promising for Corsicana as well.
Absolutely. I mean, not only were they quick fixes, we had the ability to reference. Just the fact that we have a reference pool of errors, it's a lot better than trying to figure out what those errors are. I call it the set it and forget it support. It's like I feel like they've covered most of their ground, so we don't have to call them as much, which in my opinion is great.
Yes.
It also gives us the ability to look over these errors ourselves and teach our team ourselves. But yeah, micro-BT has been really, really helpful for that.
Yeah. So in Rockdale today, there's, let's say, 100,000 mining rigs. Probably a little bit less, right? Like 96,000 or something?
It's about 99,000.
99,000. Wow. All right. We're heading towards 100,000.
There it is.
And so, as I was saying, like you're ahead of HR for 100,000. You got 100,000 people, workers reporting to you.
Yep.
What are the challenges of operating at that scale? 'Cause it's a giant site, right? It's 100 acres, divided by how many buildings? 5.
I'd say definitely the hardest is finding the personnel to service so many machines and making sure these personnel this is where their talents lie. Because when you're servicing 100,000 machines, you could have 500 fault in one day, or you could have 50 fault in one day. So you always want to over prepare. And I think that's where Anthony and me have worked together so close on is training, is making sure that everybody on this minor maintenance team is at the same level and can handle any repair thrown their way, or they're on a pathway to being at that level. So I think that's our biggest hurdle so far.
What do you look for in those new hires that going into the training?
So this is something I actually picked up from Anthony is you want people that when they look at a problem, they don't say, I don't know. They try to fix it themselves And if not, they go and try to find that answer for themselves and not just leave it for the next person.
Yeah.
I believe that if somebody can do that and that's their mindset going into this job, I can work with that. Even if they have no IT experience, no crypto experience, nothing, and they're just good with their hands, that's a base to build off of. I love hiring gamers. There
Absolutely.
is nothing, because that there is skills built into that. Okay, hey, there's a problem. How do I fix it? Or how do I go on YouTube and find a guide on how to do this? Follow this step by step. Not just say, okay, this got hard. I'm done with this game.
Right.
I'll be honest with you. In the very, very beginning, I was pretty hard on Matt. I gave Matt a lot of complicated tasks, and I knew that he wouldn't necessarily be able to give me the answer immediately. But what I wanted, and this is something that I wanted him to instill into his team, is if one person can do it, the next person can do it. All it requires is some research. None of this is too complicated, and we could teach anyone. And what I've noticed about Matt is that he takes his time. He goes out of his way to walk people through the correct methods to find answers. And it's something that I was taught that from my family. It was just there was no such thing as there's not an answer. Go find it, and that's it. And I feel like that's pivotal in training and teaching anyone, because once a person is found, or at least took the pathway to find an answer, that means they could use that same method and technique to find another answer. That could apply to multiple ways in their life, outside of this and inside of this, inside of the office. And it's just, I don't know, I think it's just something that's very important for team building. And overall, like, I don't know, if we all struggle together, we know how much it sucks to find an answer for something. If we all know that struggle, then we can all talk about this thing, and maybe somebody might find an easier way of making these things come across.
Yeah. And so there's the problem solving aspect of it. And then is there also a part of it of continuing, right? That it's, you might solve one problem, but that only opens up the door to another problem.
That's actually a great segue into how like the S19s work is.
Yeah.
That's how they check their error log. Is like, okay, hey, you may have fixed problem A, but once it finds an error, it just stops reading. So bam, another one might be there.
Right.
Bam, you may spend 3 hours on one miner because there's just that many faults and it was covered up by one. So having somebody there that can stay dedicated to this task and knowing that every miner matters on that site, and one miner online is a step closer to our goal.
Yeah.
So attention to detail, essentially.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely, when you get a miner, you have to make sure it's passed all those flag checks. You're not going to you can't, if you get a miner, you need to make sure it's 100% when it's done.
Yeah.
You got it at 80%, make sure it's at 100 by the time you check it off. So there's a bunch of different flags that you have to check before, you sign it off.
So how many roles do you have open in your respective departments, and how many people are you looking for?
So actually right now, that's a big road for us to be on. I'm looking to double the size of my miner maintenance team in terms of supervisors and technicians. I currently have 42 people. I want to have that number closer to 90 to be able to actually accurately service 99,000 machines.
Right. And what about yourself, Anthony?
So as far as the IT department's concerned, we could look for anyone in any department. We could use IT management. We could use more people in security if people are looking. We could also use people in support and administration. So in all honesty, it's an open door.
Yeah.
We could always use more help. The team could always be bolstered a little more. So
yeah,
the doors are open. People would like to apply.
And for IT, I think it's mostly here in Round Rock.
Yeah, yes, but we have other spots. We have the Corsicana location. We do have some locations out in Colorado also that we could use help in. So
yeah,
got it. And Matt, your team is right now only in Rockdale, but eventually in Corsicana as well.
very soon I will be hiring people for our Corsicana site.
Yeah, as it gets energized.
Yep.
That's awesome.
I want to have the team in place before the miners go online, so that way we can bring them here, give them the adequate training, and then we're starting with a completely clean slate. It's very exciting.
what date is that? When?
I believe correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe like March, February is when we're starting to bring people in for training.
There it is.
Fantastic. And when you're thinking about kind of the future of Bitcoin mining, with increased reliability, I imagine there's going to be more and more issues that are surprising rather than routine. Do you feel it the same way?
I do. I think it's a history, and I believe every miner model that comes out is going to have its new set of problems, and it's going to be up to us to find the most efficient solution for these problems. And I think they'll just keep coming, and we'll keep hammering away at them.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is more miners, more problems?
More miners, more problems.
There it is.
Hey, it's easy to run a site of 300 miners. I remember when we had that luxury of running, I think we were running 10,000 back 2 years ago. We had 10,000 miners, and I was like, oh, this is easy. And then now we're at 100,000. I'm like, oh, this is where we've ended up.
How do you keep track of which mining rigs need repairs and which are good to go?
So actually, we're building a complete software directly in-house that's helping us build it. Our software developers, they're building it, and there has a work ticket system, notifications, alerts, and it is a master database that has been huge in our repair process.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we get new miners in, the development team takes them, they take a look at all the logs, and then they try to, they complete in making error alerts according to said logs. It's a process that goes into it. I don't want to speak too much into it because it's not my department necessarily, but they take a lot of time, and they built this software around each one of the miners that comes in. So it's a process, but it's pretty neat. It's neat that it's home built. It's in-house, if you will.
Fine-tuned for us.
Exactly. So we don't get any bloat, if you will. We get exactly what we need when it comes down to repairs and issues.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, when we're operating at this scale, ultimately we do need the help of software in order to help guide kind of where folks should be focusing to have the maximum impact on uptime and keeping those miners happy.
And that's the absolute benefit of having it in-house, because we could, if a change needs to be made specifically, we don't have to go to a third-party vendor and have them take time to develop it. We could just run next door and be like, hey, guys, could you check this out, please? We're having a serious issue. Can you fix this or give us a solution?
And then 99% of the time, the answer is, yeah, no problem. Have it done soon.
Absolutely.
And it is a very unique problem set compared to other industries where I mentioned it's 100,000 workers, but it's also like 100,000 customers.
Right.
And that this is like customer support for these 100,000, and you got to go solve their problems so that they're happy customers.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And what happens every time that the 100,000 gets larger, it's just more variables of issues.
Yeah.
You know, it's 100,000 more cars on the street, which means 100,000 more possibilities of a flat tire.
Because then, as you were saying, there's the building around it.
Right.
And so there's the network switch. Does the network switch have a problem, right? Like, does the Ethernet cable have a problem? Does the PDU so there's kind of an ecosystem around it.
I mean, it's down to the PDU having issues, your evaporative cooling system, if you're in an air and you're cooling the miners, is that out? Is the airflow in the building choked off? All of these things can lead to unhappy customers.
Right. Ethernet cables, that's another crazy
snapped.
thing. Power cables, things like that, just things that you really wouldn't think of. It doesn't really hit you until you hit a certain amount of miners.
Yep.
But 100 miners, you may see a power cable issue every few months.
Mm-hmm.
With 100,000, you're seeing them every few days.
Well, it's like back when I was saying like 2 years ago, we only had 10,000 miners. I think we had a team of 5 technicians, and we were doing like 10 to 15 repairs a day because like the environment around it was so spaced out and so miner friendly that now it's, oh, hey, all of our customers are happy. They're living in paradise.
Yeah.
Now it's crowded in there.
Yeah.
It's now we're doing anywhere from 400 to 500 repairs a day, running 24/7, and we're still hiring because we want that number higher on repairs.
And is the heat during the summer, is that particularly brutal?
Very brutal. Texas summers, they get up to 110, 112 degrees.
Triple digits on average.
On average.
Yeah.
And these miners, they have a set guide. They have a set limit that they want to hash at. And especially when you're getting into the miners being next to each other, they start radiating that heat, and then it gets even hotter. Pressure starts building up in the hot aisle, and preach to my team, all the little things start stacking up. And then all the little things you do to solve it will break that down. So
Absolutely.
everything you're doing to fix it is big on the grand scale. Don't think I just did this. No, this is working.
Yeah, every little action counts.
Yes.
Absolutely. And another thing to speak to the infrastructure of things, the switches and cabling that we use, they're not built for this weather. We're using standard network switches. They're not built for 100-degree plus every day of their life. So those things are going out
They're
constantly.
built for climate-controlled 70-degree data centers.
Absolutely. And we have sand and heat and snow and wind and water blowing these things at all times. So it's a delicate science, but like with the way the teams are working out currently, we are maintaining as we go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people underappreciate the difference between a traditional data center that is climate controlled versus a Bitcoin mining facility where it's not so much about climate control as it is about kind of trying to lower the intake temperature by some amount.
Right.
And it changes the, we can focus on how it changes the economics, but it profoundly changes the operations as well of how this data center gets maintained and its utility going forward.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of people ask us, why don't we just put a bunch of air conditioners in our data center? And
These miners would laugh at them.
yeah, it's just to spell that ahead of time. It's impossible. We don't have enough cooling on the planet, and I don't believe it would cost too much money, wouldn't it? Just to say, so to
it would,
speak.
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, if we
Wouldn't
look,
be efficient.
our break even is $100 per megawatt, roughly, let's say, and this is not ours. This is like the industries as a whole. And when if you're mining for let's say $50 a megawatt, so you've got a 50% profit margin. But if you start adding air conditioning, well, now it's $200 a megawatt, right? And so you're like running at a loss for every Bitcoin that you mine. I think this is what the critics miss, is that Bitcoin mining is super efficient, and that any inefficiencies get priced out. And having air conditioning is less efficient than having Matt's team come and fix miners.
Absolutely.
Yes.
When you do the math, yeah. That's counterintuitive, but it makes me glad that we've got awesome teams working on it.
They are awesome.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I hope that Matt. I hope we see more miner maintenance videos come out. I know that we've got some on the YouTube already.
Yeah. I'm excited for that as well.
And,
Instructional guides everywhere. I want to make this as open source as possible.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Thank you, Anthony, for
Thank
coming
you.
on.
All right.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, man. Great to be here.
And we'll see y'all again next week for the next episode of Block Time with Riot.